All right, welcome back. Today, we are going to be talking about federal versus private loans. We're just going to do a deep dive into that. So first, let's lay down some ground rules. I am not giving you legal advice. First disclaimer. Second, I'm not giving you personal finance advice. I'm giving explainers and resources so that you know where to go, or if you're like, I just don't understand what's happening, this is what this is about. Please don't drop your personal information in the comments. No bueno. So, student loan debts. Most people, first question is, what do you have? Do you have federal student loans or do you have private student loans? And why does this matter? About 7% of all student loan debt is private student loan debt. The remaining 92% is federal student loan debt. So when you hear people talking about the student loan debt crisis, they're talking about the federal student loan debt and what that means. Here's another reason why it does not impact people who have private student loans. When you have private student loans, or if you had federal loans and you refinance or consolidate it into private, you are no longer eligible for any of the federal forgiveness programs. You're not eligible for the up to $20,000. You're not eligible for public service loan discharge. You're not eligible for teacher loan forgiveness. So that is something you want to be mindful of. Also, if you die and you have federal student loans, if you're a minor, that debt is forgiven. If you're an adult, that debt is forgiven. If you die with federal student loans, your loans are discharged. If you die and you have private student loans, that debt is passed to your estate and heirs. So if you are a minor and you pass, that debt is passed on to your parents. And technically, the private student loan servicer can come after them for the money. If, come after your estate. If you're married, your spouse gets that private student loan debt. So just saying, if you guys are talking about getting married, you might want to have that student loan conversation. And let's get into why people get federal versus private. Again, I mentioned if you have federal student loans, you're eligible for deferment, forbearance, loan forgiveness, loan discharge. If you are a public servant and you can get your public service loan forgiveness. If you're a teacher, you can get the teacher loan forgiveness. And if you're in an income-driven repayment plan, IDR, typically those plans are set up so that after you've been in repayment for 20 to 25 years, your loans, the remaining balance is discharged. None of that happens if you get private loans. The other thing is, when it comes to private loans, you need to qualify with the credit score and all that other stuff. Not the case when it comes to federal. So those are the things to consider when you're trying to figure out, do I want federal or private? And so as we're talking about student loan forgiveness, you want to make sure you know what kind you have. If you don't have private, as we talk about student loan forgiveness, you'll hear there are eligibility requirements for people who have certain types of loans, direct unsubsidized, or certain people who have commercially held loans may not qualify, or you have to do more. This is where you want to go to studentaid.gov. Go to that website, and it will, if you haven't set up a profile, and it will tell you what your loans are, whether or not they're direct or blah, 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 and who your loan servicer is. So if you haven't went on the studentaid.gov site since the pandemic, go in, find out, what loans you have, what your balance is, who your loan servicer is. So if somebody randomly calls you up and says, hey, I'm your loan servicer, you're not taken in for the scam. All right. Now, when it comes to these federal student loans, one of the things that most people, you probably know if you have federal student loans, if you are in forbearance, because when the pandemic happened, President Trump and later President Biden extended the federal forbearance pause. Right now, due to litigation on Biden's up to $20,000 in student loan forgiveness, the federal payment pause is in effect until June 30th. And 60 days thereafter, you should start repayment. So you want to go to the site, studentaid.gov, figure out what your loans are and who your loan servicer is. Because even if the up to $20,000 is approved, so quite a few people are still going to have remaining debt. So you want to be aware of what that looks like. And I've seen the emails, I've seen the flyers, hey, from private lenders, maybe you want to even with after, Biden's thing, maybe you want to refinance. Here's why you don't want to do that. Because whether or not you qualify for the up to $20,000 in loan forgiveness, there are several reforms that are happening that all federal borrowers will be eligible for. And I'm particularly referring to the IDR one-time payment adjustment. So if you decide that, oh, even if I get the $20,000, maybe I should refi that remaining balance into a private, you're going to miss out on the one-time payment adjustment, which you don't want to miss out on. There will be a separate whole video on the one-time payment adjustment. Game changer for borrowers. Trust me. All right. So when it comes to these loans, here's something that I want to talk about. Sidebar, financial literacy. I recall way back when I was getting ready to go to college, and I'm first generation, and everyone was like, student loan debt is good debt. But even then, college was much, much cheaper. By the time I took off time and went to law school, tuition was crazy, which was why I went in state. And even still, it was crazy. I spoke to borrowers, and one of the things that quite a few said was, no one had the conversation with them. One borrower was like, she took out over $13,000 her freshman year that she didn't need. I was like, what do you mean? She's like, that's what they told me in the financial aid office. She's like, but they had students working in the financial aid office. Ignorance is not bliss, particularly when it comes to something like these student loans, because it can hamper your ability to buy a home and, just your future credit worthiness. So just going in and taking out loans because you can is not good. You can't at 18 years old go to a bank and get $20,000, but they're letting you do it for student loans. That is not smart. I spoke to people, particularly first generation students, who were like, no one knew. They just assumed that there would be grants or something like that. And then when the grants and the scholarships didn't cover everything, they were like, okay, we'll just take out those loans. So what needs to happen, the discussion about college should be happening before your junior year in high school. It should be happening freshman year. Most parents, most other people have that discussion even earlier. To have the discussion of someone was like, their child was like, do we have enough money for me to go to college after she got accepted? That conversation shouldn't have been after the fact. It should have been before the fact. Sit down, have the conversation with your kids. Hey, we do have money set aside, or we don't. That being the case, then, because I've heard kids, I got accepted into my favorite school. It was a private school. Tuition was extremely high, and they got upset because they were like, why can't I go? I was like, well, did you have the conversation? Did your parents, because they were like, well, my parents said they couldn't afford. The conversations need to be had earlier on. Here's what the college is costing. Here's how much I set aside. The one student that, her mother saved up $13,000, which she was like in 1996, seemed like a lot of money. And guess what? It only covered her room and board. So have the conversations earlier. And sometimes it means, well, maybe, you have to go in state because it's cheaper. Maybe it means you can't stay on campus. But you need to have that conversation, because what's happening is not having the conversations is leading to massive amounts of debt, because people are not getting into debt on purpose. They just don't know. And unfortunately, like I said, the The girl said, you know, they had students working in the student aid office, in the financial aid office, and they told her to take out the money. So she took it out. We've all made stupid mistakes. I'm not here to pass blame, but have conversations. Start having these financial conversations earlier and not after the fact. All right, that was an aside. Thank you, and we're going to move on to the next topic. Catch me later.